Hey, it's Nick Fundytus here, and this is Nick Answers Reddit for June 27th, 2024. And today's question is about a myth in real estate. It's the 24-hour rule. So today's question comes from someone who has bought a home and is closing. And as they say, I'm struggling to understand how the 24 hours after the possession day works in terms of identifying any issues. I've heard about this period and our realtor mentioned it, but I wasn't clear how we are covered if any problems with the house arise after we take possession. So some background, this person made an offer, and during the inspection, there were some issues found. So this buyer negotiated and agreed with the seller, and the seller agreed to fix these things. So a new offer was written with all the necessary fixes included. I suspect it was more like a counter offer was probably done, or an amendment, and a date 1 week before possession where the buyer could go and confirm that everything is fixed. Now the concern is if everything goes fine and possession goes through, he was told that I have 24 hours to verify everything again. So if anything, not only agreed upon the agreed upon fixes fails, I could inform the lawyer. So they want to know if this is 100% accurate and understand real scenarios where we could use this provision. So to answer this, there may be places in Canada where there is some legally written 24-hour rule. However, in Ontario, it doesn't exist. And the safest thing for you as a home purchaser is to assume that it doesn't exist. So conduct yourself as if it doesn't. So I don't know what province you're located in, but I'm not aware of any official or legal 24-hour rule. What you're asking about is basically this amounts to a 24-hour extra warranty on any chattels or fixtures that are included with the sale. So it says that they'll be in good working order. Now, this is not to say that the items should not be in good working order on closing. So, we often have a paragraph in our offers here in Ottawa that says something to the effect of that the seller represents and warrants that all chattels and fixtures, as mentioned in this agreement of purchase and sale, will be in good working order upon completion, so upon closing of this agreement, and that basically what that phrase amounts to is that everything has to be working on closing, but as soon as closing is done, they are not the seller's problem anymore. So that doesn't suggest any sort of 24-hour period. There's certainly no 24-hour period mentioned, although if it ever goes to court, a judge is going to look at what is reasonable in there and what follows the law. So I'm going to answer you from the perspective of a buyer who understandably just wants to make sure that everything is in good working order on closing, and how can you be protected about that. So first off, it's very good that you negotiated these fixes in writing in your agreement of purchase and sale. That's the best place for them. The absolute best practice, I would say, is to have a specific recourse written into the agreement of purchase and sale if these things are not done. I think it's even better, actually, if there are issues on a closing that are not immediate, to just negotiate a change in the purchase price, because then you as a purchaser can have your own contractor fix something when you move in. And you know that it's by contractors that you've chosen and that you're satisfied with. Number two, assume that the 24-hour rule doesn't exist, and at best, it's a custom in your market. Conduct yourselves accordingly and take steps so that you don't have to use the last-ditch tool of going to small claims court. Small claims court is slow, it's expensive, and there's no guarantee that you're going to, get paid back for a deficiency that the seller is. There's a certain burden of proof on you to make sure that that you prove that the seller was negligent in some way or deceitful in some way. So here's what you do to make sure that you are looking after yourself. Number one, your verification visit. So when you go look at these fixes, probably during the last week before closing as your final walkthrough, document everything. So document with photographs and email any fixes. So show the state of them. So if they are worse when you move in, that you can immediately, and I mean immediately, so like the moment you walk into that house after you get the keys, you document any changes to that. And then when you document, email your own realtor and your lawyer at the minimum, just so there's a date stamp on some of the material that you've done there. If there are receipts that have to be provided for any work that the seller has done, so for example, if they agreed to do some roof work and it was to be done by a professional roofer, make sure that they're providing receipts. So if they're providing receipts, insist that it is done by the walkthrough date and not just by the closing date. Because on the closing date, as soon as you get to closing date and money has changed hands, so your money from your lender and your down payment has gone over to the seller's lawyer, it is much, 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 much harder to get that back than it is simply to deal with it ahead of time. So insist that any receipts come during the final walkthrough. And if that's not possible for some reason, so for example, maybe this roofer can't get in until a couple days before closing and you have the final walkthrough before that, then what you can do is talk to your lawyer and have him talk to the seller's lawyer and see if they can agree to some other way to protect you. This might be done through a lawyer's holdback, for example, and a lawyer's holdback is simply where the lawyers agree that a certain amount of money is held apart from the closing money that would get paid to the seller, and then it is usually once any fix that was agreed upon in the contract is done, then that money can be released to the seller. But if the fix is not done, then that money is released to the buyer to then contract somebody to do the repair. And then if there's leftover, then it's finally sent to the seller. So, I mean, don't use that as your first resort, but it is a tool that's available to you if appropriate. If you're concerned that any key systems like your AC or your washer and dryer won't be working on closing, run them during your final walkthrough. Not every seller is going to like it. I mean, some of them are going to get ticked off that you ran a rinse cycle in the dishwasher. I mean, at that point, I don't really care too much about the seller's feelings about running a rinse cycle. You want to make sure that your appliances are working, and I mean, go ahead. As long as you're not harming anything in the house, and certainly like running a rinse cycle or tossing a towel in the washer or dryer isn't going to harm anything. It's not a guarantee that the appliances are going to work on closing, but it's a pretty good indication that they will. And I'll get to that later. So next is a question for you. Is it your lawyer or your realtor or some other non-lawyer who's told you about this 24-hour? So if it's not a lawyer who's told you about the 24-hour rule, assume it's not true. A realtor or any other layperson who's not practicing law should not be quoting law without also recommending that you verify that with your lawyer. We, as realtors and any other professionals, this goes for your mortgage broker, we should be staying in our lane and doing our particular role to the best of our ability. Okay, so in my experience, I have come across some scenarios where a buyer has been able to pursue a seller after the closing, either in just case law that we've reviewed, or I shouldn't say case law, but like cases in our board. And then in the best cases, the best resolutions for the buyer come when the buyer's realtor has written provisions for these into the agreement of purchase and sale where the recourse is automatic. And in the worst cases, it ends up in a long, drawn-out court case. So number one, so a buyer finds something seasonal. So for example, you buy a property with a pool during the winter, and in the spring, you find out that it clearly has not been closed properly, and it causes issues with the mechanical systems of it when you try and open it in the spring or open it in the summer. Now, if a seller has said that it was professionally closed and you can demonstrate that it must not have been because of how it is in the spring or the summer, then that's something where you might be able to go back and get, it might be easier to get some sort of remediation from the seller because clearly they're in the wrong at some point. Same thing if they verify that the central AC is working and then the first warm day of the spring, you verify you turn on the AC and it grinds to a halt. I mean, a little harder to prove, but again, I mean, there are cases where a buyer has been able to go back and get compensated by a seller. Other ones where a seller asserts that something was done with code and you don't have a way, or to code, and you don't have a way to verify that. So if a buyer did a basement finishing and they said that a professional electrician did all the wiring, and then you open up a wall because you have to do some other fix, and you see that that is clearly not the case, you may be able to take that back and pursue the seller in court. It's never fun to pursue someone in court. Your best bet is to, start off protecting yourself, which leads me to my next point and my last point is just to have a healthy amount of skepticism when you are purchasing a house. but be careful not to stray into paranoid territory. Not everyone is out to get you as a buyer. As a seller, not everybody is out to cheat you. Buying a home is stressful. And I have found over the years that some home buyers see every action by the seller as deceitful. But in my experience, I mean, both buyers and sellers in a transaction are generally good. They're generally positive, and they're trying to get the best results for themselves, but in a human way. They're not out to cheat other parties. That nobody feels. I mean, most people don't feel good about that. Make sure that you are protected against any outcomes that you are concerned about. But unless the seller has been shown to be shifty or appearing to be hiding some sort of deficiency along the way, the most likely outcome for you here is a smooth transaction. It sounds like you've taken some steps to protect yourself well, and I would put your own mind at ease a little bit. Assume that the 24-hour rule is not a rule where you are located. Conduct yourself accordingly, but I mean, the most likely outcome here is that you're going to be fine. I would love to hear how it turns out for you. I think it's instructional for everybody on Reddit. There's tons of people who have the same question if you have it. And good luck. Take care, and we'll hope to hear from you.